plant is managing that gap. That's not the gap that freaks me out. What's the gap that freaks me out? There's only one left, and it's up there. I feel like you'll get this. That's the gap. And if I said anything to you today that's meaningful, it would be this. You have to tell the story of what's happening. Because the blue line is, in fact, the story of every failure. But you know what else the blue line is? The story of every single success you've ever had. The blue line is you. And what you bring to the table is a real-time understanding, not of just the process, but of the variability that you manage in the plant. Asking you to help me understand gives me better information than if I hold you accountable to the black line. So where does this take us? Well, this slide's really important, and I put it in just for you guys. When nothing's happening at your plant, a lot of things are happening. Safety is a dynamic non-event. You work your butt off to make sure people don't get hurt. What scares me is I think the belief is when no accidents are happening, everything's running smooth. That's not true. When no accidents are happening, you're out there in real time interfacing with risk and adapting, correcting, and detecting, and fixing it in real time. That's enormously important to what we think about. So where does this take us? Is the juice worth the squeeze? This is my very favorite slide in the whole world. And I think the answer is, yeah, it's worth it. But to get you there, one of the things I have to tell you is that we have to start responding earlier to operator discomfort. Look for places where we put the worker in a position where there's a conflict between doing it right and doing it wrong. Because the earlier we can identify this problem, the more capacity we have to handle this problem. If we wait for the problem to get big, look what doesn't change. Oh, wait. That's important. So where does this take us? I think you have two choices. For the managers in this room, I'm talking to you. When something happens, you make a strategic decision about your operations. And that is, you have two choices, and these are deliberate choices. You can blame and punish, or you can learn and improve. But you can't do both. If you choose to blame and punish, you're giving up learning. And there are probably events that happen where blame and punish is the right answer. You come to work drunk, maybe we should punish you. But if you choose to learn and improve, what you're buying is the ability to understand that blue line. What you're giving up is that ability to punish the bad guy. And the best story I could tell you, and I really feel like I should tell this in this room, is I was in Salt Lake City at a refinery. And the plant manager was really struggling with this slide. And he said to me, I can do both. And I said, you can't. It's like going east-west. You can't go east-west, right? They're opposing theories. You cannot do both. And he said, well, I believe I can. And I said, I don't think it's possible. And it starts to get a little heated. And one of the people in the class raised his hand and he said, can I translate this into Utah? Well, if somebody ever says that in the class you're in, the only answer to that is yes. I mean, who doesn't want to hear that, right? I mean, yeah, I'd like to hear this translated into Utah. And he looked at that plant manager and he said, if you disapprove of your daughter's first boyfriend, you'll never meet the second. If I'd have had a microphone, I'd have dropped it. What amazes me is how poignant that is in illustrating this idea. This, my friends, is everything. And it's a strategic decision. And that decision just doesn't belong to management. In this room, I'm going to tell you something. Oftentimes, the harshest critics of our behavior is us. I need you to write this down and think about this as well. Before you react mindlessly, I'd like you to think about reacting mindfully. Which brings me to the glove. So I asked permission to tell this story, and I actually thought the guys from UAW were going to be here, but something happened and they couldn't come. But I don't know if you know this, but there's a company called Ford. Have you heard of this? So you've heard of them. They have 10 manufacturing facilities, and for about 15 years, give or take a couple years, they average 6 finger amputations per year per facility. So 10 plants, 6 finger amputations per plant. Quick, what's the grand total per year? 60. And they said, that's unacceptable. That's just not right. And the UAW and the company got together and they said, we got to do something. We got people in our plant that can no longer give high five. We're ruining the pool of banjo players that are being sent out into the world, right? We got to do something about this. And so you know what they decided to do? A hand safety campaign. And they got some posters and some stickers and some banners. They had pictures of a man's hand and a baby's hand. They had big signs that say, don't cut your hand off. Do not amputate your finger. Good workers amputate fewer fingers than bad workers. And they rolled this program out hard and fast across the country. They put together a training course where they brought people into a room and told them not to cut off their fingers. And they hit it big. And they spent a lot of money on it. And what do you think happened to their totals? Stayed the same. Because if you cut off 60 fingers 10 years in a row, I'm not a betting man, but I'd bet a couple bucks that the 11th year, it's going to come in somewhere around 60. Because your system is perfectly attuned to get what it gets. If you want something different, you got to bust that asymptote. So the UAW guys got together and they said, we want to try this new idea. The worker's not the problem, the worker's the solution. So they put together 10 little teams at each plant, and they said, you got 2 days. We're going to tackle finger amputations. You can do anything you want to, and there's unlimited pizza. Just saying, right? It's the currency of our world, right? The only rule is, listen to this carefully, you can't talk about hands. So they got together and they said, why is it that 15 years ago we all of a sudden went to this 60 number? What changed? And they said, you know, it was about 15 years ago when we switched over to 24-volt DC nut drivers. Before they had that, they went from wrench to socket to pneumatic to AC to DC. What changes in that little story between wrench and DC nut driver? Starts with T and rhymes with pork. Torque. What do we know about a 24-volt DC nut driver? It's got a lot of torque. In fact, when you trigger that nut driver, there's not a lot of escape time. It happens fast because it's a direct drive. And then they said, how many times do we expose the worker to this hazard? And they counted up, and it was 10,000 times a month. 10,000 times a month. And they said, wow, that's a lot of opportunity to get your finger cut off. A good worker is probably going to have 1 near miss a month. A bad worker, maybe having 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 near misses a month. There's a lot of opportunity for this to fail. They said, let's not try to manage the accident. Let's manage the capacity to have this accident safely. What do you see? You guys, these are gloves with tearaway fingers. What's amazing about this is that I would have never thought of this in 100 billion years, maybe longer. What is the biggest number? 100 gazillion years, right? What's remarkable about this is what happened next. Ask me how many finger amputations Ford had 2 years ago. 0. Last year, 0. And what's amazing is what they said is, these gloves are our idea, and everybody wears gloves, so they didn't have a problem with glove use. They said when a person gets their finger ripped off, it's a celebration, not a punishment. And when they come to replace that glove with the torn finger, we're going to do a mini investigation right then, and we're going to ask them what happened and how did it happen. Congratulations, here's a new glove. And what they did was build a system that allowed them to learn and understand that process. And out of that came a really interesting story. It wasn't the glove getting caught between the nut driver socket and the nut. It was the fact that if you run a socket 10,000 times, 3 shifts, so that's 30,000 times a month, it burrs out. And those burrs were catching the gloves, and that's what was pulling the fingers in. They got a different form of socket, a different metal, and they actually took that hazard away. Now, I don't know if these gloves are a good idea or a bad idea, because I don't know anything about this business. But what I know is they solved this problem in a much different way. They did something really important. They realized that the workers weren't the problem, they were the solution. Instead of telling the workers not to cut their fingers off, they asked the workers what they need in order to make this fail gracefully. And then they counted success as not as the absence of amputated fingers, but as the presence of these gloves. Safety is not the absence of accidents. I'm sorry, because lots of people have told you for years and years and years that every accident is preventable, and that if you work hard enough and take care of the small ones, the big ones will solve themselves. That's not true. The reason an organization like you guys still kill people is because the things that kill people are not the same things that hurt people. What you manage is not accident. What you manage is capacity. I got one more special slide for you. So I told you I had to teach a class yesterday morning, so I got in here a little late. Jim and Mike are so kind. They checked me into a fabulous hotel. I don't know if I can pronounce it. I think it's French. Hampton Inn. Am I saying that right? Am I saying it right? It's French. I didn't know what it was. I get into the room. I'm making myself comfortable, doing my stuff, and I look up, and the housekeeper clearly forgot to stash something, but I actually think it's the happiest accident that's ever happened in my life. I look over on the counter, and this is on the counter. Now, this is handy in all kinds of uses, but I learned something today. I don't know if you can see this well. I'll highlight the part that really interested in me. You guys, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I've been using amateur my whole life. Let's just say last night I moved up a level. I want to share with you one other thing. If you get a chance and you want to keep this conversation going, the one thing that I have that I can offer you guys, it doesn't cost anything, is I got this little podcast that started a couple years ago. Now there's like 500,000 people that listen to it. All we talk about is this. In fact, one of my proudest moments is this fine gentleman. You dress up nice. I've actually never seen you dressed up. You look good. It's like you're ready for a funeral now. I mean, just like, right? Mike's on it, and he's remarkable. What it is it's just conversations where we talk about these new ideas and new safety. And what we really do, you guys, which is something I'd highly encourage you to do, is celebrate success. Because what I'm more interested in your plant is not how you fail. I'm way more interested in how you guys succeed. That's my time. Thank you so much. This was amazing. Like I'm going to shake your hand, buddy. Thank you. Thanks.